The polar arrangement of bonds in water is responsible for many of its properties and controls many aspects of life on Earth. Hydrogen bonds between molecules, particularly water, are a key part of living systems. Remember, we talked about hydrogen bonds previously. Water's properties of adhesion and cohesion help maintain cell structure. The high thermal energy of water is important for evaporative cooling of living organisms. Water is a solvent present in all cells, and the hydrogen bonds of water molecules stabilize ions in aqueous solutions by forming hydration shells. The molarity and pH, whether acidic or basic, of solutions reflects the concentrations of chemicals dissolved in them and the properties of the solution. All cells are aqueous solutions, and the contents are controlled through buffering and selective transport, which we'll talk about a lot more later. Substances can be classified as hydrophilic or hydrophobic based on their interactions with water, and this is a key factor in determining where and how they interact with other molecules in a cell. Okay, so key thing to remember about water is that it is really great at hydrogen bonding. So remember, a hydrogen bond occurs when we have partial positive and partial negative parts. Usually these are going to be in different molecules. We'll talk about some cases where like extreme different regions of a large molecule can form hydrogen bonds that pull them close together. But when we talk about water molecules, we're talking about the partially negative oxygen interacting with a partially positive hydrogen. Okay, so when we look at groups of water molecules, we've got both covalent bonds within each molecule and hydrogen bonds between the molecules, determining how they interact with each other. And this can actually change. So this is showing you if the temperature is cold, then the water molecules actually have greater attraction between each other because they need to pack closer together. They don't have as much energy to move around. And this means that the oxygens from one water molecule actually have more pull on the hydrogens from adjacent water molecules. So this means that the hydrogen bonds end up getting shorter to allow the water molecules to pack closer together, which lengthens out the covalent bonds. Conversely, when water gets warmer, the molecules start to move farther and farther apart. Their hydrogen bonds also start to lengthen. As the hydrogen bonds lengthen, the oxygen molecule in a water molecule is oxygen atom is more attracted to its own hydrogens and less attracted to hydrogens in other molecules. So this actually contracts the covalent bonds within the molecule and as the hydrogen bonds lengthen. Okay. And watch this. This is going to actually show you the initial steps of melting an ice crystal. So I'll pause the video here. You can see each of these little red pieces represents an oxygen and then the two hydrogens here. And the little white dotted lines in between these molecules are representing the hydrogen bonds between them. So in the initial ice crystal, you can see they are incredibly ordered and similar throughout the crystal. And as heat is applied in this computer simulation, those bonds are going to start to lengthen. Here you can see they've started to stretch out, and each of the individual molecules is rotating. And eventually enough energy is going to be present in the system because of the heat being added that some of the hydrogen bonds will lengthen to the point where they cannot be reformed. You'll see some of them transiently break and either reform between the same molecules or with a different molecule, and then eventually we reach this point where the molecules are no longer able to stay in connection with each other, and so the hydrogen bonds can't be maintained. Okay, this is the point where we go from liquid to gas. So because of this hydrogen bonding between water molecules, we get some special abilities associated with water. Two of these have to do with how water molecules stick to things. So we have this idea of adhesion, that water can stick to surfaces. So here these droplets are adhered to the surface of these plant cells. in order for something to be adhesible, in order for water to adhere to it, it needs to have some polar characteristics. So if you have a very non-polar structure to a group of molecules, they're not going to be able to be adhered to by water. We call those things hydrophobic surfaces. You can actually get hydrophobic cleaning supplies that repel water. Water also has a tendency to stick to itself, and we call this cohesion. And you can see this in the actual formation of the droplets. They're nice and round, and they're able to resist gravity by this power of cohesion, which holds the molecules to each other as well as onto the plant where it is adhered. Hydrogen bonding also allows water to form what are called hydration shells, and this is really critical for its ability to dissolve substances. So here you can see when we have ionic substances that are placed into water, the positively charged ions attract a hydration shell of negative, mainly oxygen-oriented water molecules, whereas the negative ions attract a hydration shell of positive, mainly hydrogen-oriented water molecules. And this is what allows those ions to be separated, and this is why we don't see a lot of ionic bonding actually in living cells. The ions are separated and surrounded by hydration shells. So, as a result of this, cells contain very complex aqueous solutions. We do a lot of work in biology to try and replicate the actual chemistry of the inside of a cell with different buffers, but the actual contents of the cytoplasm and all the different organelles are a very complex solution of different things dissolved in water. So here you can see all these different parts of this cell. The numbers are representing the pH, which is a representation of the hydrogen ion concentration. And you can see that the pH varies a lot in these different parts of the cell. So even though it's all the same cell, the chemistry is going to be different in each of these parts. This is a eukaryotic cell. This is why it has all those parts. And the ability to manipulate chemistry differently in each of the different components of the cell is what's going to allow it to perform lots of complicated chemical reactions.